لباری ئاسایشی جیهان و ناوچەکەمان لە قۆناغی دوای داعش تێبگەین. بۆیش زۆر خۆشحاڵم کە ئەمڕۆ میوانێکی زۆر شارەزا پسپۆر لە دژە ترۆر کە لە سەر ئاسی نێودەوڵەتی ناوبانگی خۆی هەیە و بە بەردەوامی ڕاوێژی پێدەکرێت دکتۆر ماگنۆس نۆریل میوانی ئێمەیە زۆر سپاسی دەکەین. بەدڵنیام کە زانیاری و تێگەشتنی زۆر بە نرخمان پێدەبەخشید لەسەر ئەو هەڕەشە و ئالنگاریە ئالۆزانەی کە لە دوای گروپێکی تونندراوی شکست خواردوودا سەر هەڵدەدەن و چۆنیەتی بەرەنگاربوونەوەی ئەو ئاستەنگانە. ئەگەر بە کورتی دکتۆر بناسێنم، دکتۆر نۆریل دکتۆرای هەیە لە زانسته سیاسیەکان لە زانکۆی ستۆکهۆڵم، توێژەری یاریدەدە لە پەیمانگای واشنگتن، ڕاوێژکاری بالای سیاسەتە لە دامەزراوەی ئەوڕۆپی و دیموکراسی FED لە بروکسل، پێشتر ڕاوێژکار و شارەزایەکی ناسراوی دەستگای هەواڵگیری سوێد بووە. لە بواری توێژینەوە لەسەر تێرۆریزم توێژینەوەیەکی یەکجار زۆری ئەنجامداوە. هەروەها لە ساڵی 1997 بۆ 2000 کەناڵێکی لە نێوان حەزبڵڵا و ئیسرائیل دروست کرد بۆ ئاسانکردنی کشانەوەی ئیسرائیل لە باشووری لوبنان. دکتۆر نۆریل لەبارەی ناکۆکی کۆنفلیکس ئەند تێرۆریزم و تێرۆریزم لە زانکۆکانی سوێدی ئیسرائیل وانە دەڵێتەوە بە هەردوو زمانی سوێدی و ئینگلیسی. بڵاوکراوەی یەکجار زۆری هەیە کە پەیوەندیدارن بە ئاسایشی نێودەوڵەتی لەوانە تێرۆریزم تۆندراوی ئیسلامی تۆندراو بارودۆخی لوبنان ڕۆلی هەواڵگەری لە دژە ترۆر و چارەسەرکردنی ناکۆکیەکان ئەگەر بەس ناوی هەندێک لەو بابەتانە بیرم. ئێمەی کورد قوربانیەکی یەکجار زۆرماندا لە شەڕی دژە تێرۆریزمدا و وەکو کوردیش یەکێک لە ئامانجە سەرەکیەکانی داعش بووین. ئەوەش هۆی زۆری هەیە. ئێوە لە من شارەزاترن ئەگەر لەوانە هەندێک ناو بینین ئەوە کە هەلکەوتی جوگرافیاییمان، کولتوری پێکەوە ژیان و دژایەتی و بەرهەڵستی بەردەواممان بەرامبەر بە ئایدۆلۆژیا و فراوانبوونی ناوچەیی گروپی تەرۆریستی بووە. لە کاتێکدا کە هێزە کوردیەکان پێشمەرگە لە باشووری کوردستان و یەکەی پاراستنی گەل و یەکەی پاراستنی ژنان لە ڕۆژاوا بوێری و خۆڕاگیریەکی بوێنەیان نیشاندا و بە هاوکاری و پشتیوانی هاوپەیمانانی نێودەوڵەتی شکستیان بە داعشێنا و نەبەس ناوچەکان بەڵکو جیهانیان لە گروپێکی تەرۆریستی دڕندەی وەک داعش ڕزگار کرد. بەڵام دیسان دەبێت زۆر وریابین چونکە هیچ ناوچەیەک توانایی بەرگری بەردەوام و تەواوی نییە دژ بە گروپی تونندراوی کە هەڕەشەی دایمی هەیە. ئێستا تێبینی دەکرێت کە هەبوونی فیزیکی داعش زۆر کەمی کردوتەوە، بەڵام ئەو گروپە بەردەوامە لە هەڕەشەکردن و توانای خۆڕاگیری خۆی نیشانداوە. ئەوەش بەردەوام بە سوودوەرگرتن لە ناڕازاتی خەڵک، ڕاکێشانی گەنجانی ناومێد، ناکۆکی تایفەیی و نەژادی یان سیاسیەکان کە لەو ژینگە ناسەقامگیرانەدا دەتوانن بەردەوام گەشە بکەن. ڕێگای جۆرە و جۆری تریش هەیە کە بۆ نمونە ئینتەرنێت، لەوانە دارک وێب، تۆڕە کۆمەڵاتیەکان، ئەپلیکیشنەکانی نامەگۆڕینەوەی کۆدکرا و پرۆپەگاندای ئانلاین و ئافلاین، شێوازی جۆرە و جۆر هەیە کە پەرە بە ئایدۆلۆژیا و فکری خۆیان بدەن لە سەراسەری جیهان. مێژووناس و فەیلسوفێکی ئیسرائیلی کە وابزانم هەمومان شارەزای کارەکانینە، هەراری هوشداری دەدات لە پەرەسەندنی هوشی دەستگردا. دەڵێتن هوشی دەستگرد ئێستا لە حاڵی حاضردا توانای ئەوەی هەیە کە تێکستی دینی بنووسیت بە شێوازێک کە قەنەعەت بە خەڵک بینیت تا حەدێک پەیڕەوی بکەن کە کوشتنیش بکەن. بۆیە ئەوانە هەموو دەست لە دەست یەکتر یارمەتیدەرن بۆ پەرەساندنی ئەو گرۆپانە نەبەس لە کوردستان یان عێراق بەلکو لە سەرانسەری جیهاندا بۆیە مەترسیە کە لە عێراق و لە کوردستان هەیە ئەو تێکەڵاوەیە لە هەبوونی دمۆگرافیەکی گەنج کە نزیکەی 160 دانیشتوانی هەرێم لە ژێر تەمەنی 25 ساڵیدانە ناسەقامگیری سیاسی ئابووری کۆمەڵایەتی هەروەها دەستڕاسیان بە تکنیک کە ئەکسەری گەنجەکانی ئێمە ئینتەرنێتیان لەبەردەستە بۆیە زۆر گرنگە کە ئێمەوە کورد و دەسەڵاتدارانی ئێمە تێگەشتنی قۆڵمان هەبیت لە استراتیژیەت و تاکتیکەکانی دێژە ترۆر بۆ ئەوەی توانەکانی خۆمان کۆ بکەینەوە لە بەرەنگاربوونەوەی تەرۆریزم و پاراستنی کۆمەلگەکەمان ئەوڕۆ لە خزمەتی شارەزایەکی هەروەکو باسم کرد نێودەوڵەتی داینە کە لەسەر ئەو بابەتە قسەمان بۆ بکرد پێشەوەی دەرفەت بدەینە دکتۆر نۆریل پێم خۆشە سپاسیەکی تایبەت لە دکتۆر خالد ساڵح بکەم بۆ ڕەخساندنی ئەم دەرفەتە و ناساندنی ئینستیتوتەکەمان بە دکتۆر نۆریل دکتۆر خالد وازانم پێویستی بە ناساندن نییە هەمومان دکتۆر خالد دەناسین ئەکادمیسیانێکی بەتوانە مامۆستای زانکۆ بووە لە سوێد لە دانمارک توێژەرە ڕاوێژکاری سەرۆکی حکوومەت بووە وتەبێژی سەرۆکی ئەنجومەن وەزیران بووە لە بابزانم ئەگەر غەڵەتە بم 2006 بۆ 2007 جێگیری سەرۆکی زانکۆی هەولێر بووە بەرحاڵ غەنی تعریفە دووبارە سپاسان دەکەم دکتۆر نۆریل 30 دقەی هەیە کە بابەتەکەی پێشکەش کرد دوای 30 دقە بۆ 40 دقەش تێبینی و پرسیارەکانی ئێوە وەردەگری
Action that I didn't understand, but it sounds pretty impressive. First of all, the language issue here. I was, as you can hear, planned to do this in English because I figured more people know English than Swedish, but I'm not so sure. But I'll stick to English, okay? If that's okay.
Both need translations,
so it doesn't really matter. All right. I started in English, so I'll continue in English. And you have to tell me when I have to stop for the translations. Because I'm not used to this.
To tell you what?
You have to tell me if I'm going too fast and too far.
Absolutely.
So the way I was thinking of doing this is to give you an overview of what I think are the major sort of problems and challenges in the region. And this is going to be fun.
We'll get around. حتى كم سنة لسرتا من أوكتام بدمي بيشتر بيناسي أكتام بدمي دواي باسي أو حداو الجاريان كم كان
Okay, and I'm very keen on having a discussion here. You know, it's been 18 years since I was here last time, and it's not the same city. It's about 3 times as big, and it's not recognizable.
زۆر حەز دەکەم کە مناقەشەیەک مان هەبێت چونکە لەو بارەیەوە زۆر ئارزووی و مناقەشە هەیە بە لەرەو شتێک من پێش 8 ساڵ بەر 18 years ago 8 ساڵ بەر لە ئێستا لێرە بووم ئەم شارە و شارە نییە کە من 8 ساڵ بەر لە ئێستا لێی بووم زۆر گەورەترە 3 جار گەورەترە 3 قات گەورەترە.
So a lot of things have happened. So I'm here to learn. So I need your interaction and need your discussion here. But first of all, the way I see it, let's go around you. If this is a bad neighborhood, if the definition of a bad neighborhood is having bad neighbors all around, you really are that. This is a tough neighborhood. So let's start with Turkey. A favorite country, right?
لا جيرانەکان تان دەست پێ بکەین لە جیرانێتی زۆر ڕەنگە لە جیرانێتی زۆر خراپدا هەڵکەوتبن ئێوە با لە تورکیاوە دەست پێ بکەین.
And the reason is, of course, that Turkey is interesting for us in Sweden too, to a very large extent, because they messed up our native application. So we have a common enemy here.
تورکیا بۆیە بەشگرنگە لە سوید چونکە ئەو داواکاریکە ئێمە هەموو بۆ ناتۆ تورکیا ڕایگرتووە کەواتە ئێمە بڵێن دوژمنێکی هاوبەشمان هەیە.
But I think Turkey is interesting in another way, and that is because it defines a problem you have by just being here in the smack in the middle of things. And that is, at the same time as it's an opponent, it is also someone you need to deal with. A lot of the investment here, I understand, comes from Turkey. A lot of the, for Kurdistan to export anything or import anything, you have to go through, excuse me, you have to go through your neighbors, regardless of the situation. And that is the situation you do have. You have to deal with a very tricky hand. And Turkey is an excellent example of that.
دژمنە نەیاریش بێت دیسانیش پێویستان بەوە هەیە کە معامەلی لەگەڵ ئەمەژە ئەو موقع تایبەتەی دروست کردووە کە پێویستان بۆ دەبێت کە لەگەڵ جیرانەکانتان جیاسەکانتان پێویستان.
And what Turkey has in common with the government down in Baghdad and your fellows to the east, Tehran, is that no one wants to see your independence. No one is against. No, everybody is against your independence. And yet, here you are in a situation where that's where you're trying to achieve. And that, as I see it, it may happen, but it's not going to happen soon. And Turkey, again, is an excellent example of that, because at the same time, and that goes for the central government down in Baghdad as well, at the same time, Kurdistan is, the way I see it, an oasis in a very problematic area. I've only been here since Saturday, but what I have seen is that this is a space here in the Middle East that is the only other country I can think of that is similar to you is Israel, because it's open, it's tolerant. You can go out and have a beer. You don't have the tension that you can feel in other countries here. So it's you have, and that's the challenge, and that's the threat to your neighbors. You have a situation and a position that makes Kurdistan into something that hasn't been had here in this place ever before.
أكيد هو حسن لسربخوية وتكون ظلامنا تركيا ولا دراسة كلا روش خلاتي وهالكتوى حزي لويكي وسربخو بنا رنگ الروب ده رنگ يوا بروجي روجان سربخو بن أبز مدون نادي من جاري إن جا بس شتى تركيا بجوية كانوا زيادة كاتو يوكو شويني كي زور فارزراوي باشتان درسكرو يعني جي كي باشتان درسكرو لزور روه كمرادفة كي من دي بين مزي إسرائيل كمزيك لزور روه.
And I'd say this is both a curse and a blessing. It is a blessing because it's an example. When I was here the last time in 2005, when I came back home, I wrote a report, and I was arguing at the time that the way to help Iraq after the war was to invest here in Kurdistan, politically and economically, and whatever other ways you can think of. That didn't happen, of course, but it should have happened. And that the fact that you still is this example is the blessing here, because you are giving people around the area something else to look at. It doesn't have to be this segregated, intolerant societies that you have all around. It can be something different, and this is your blessing.
وبرهنان لهري كردستان داكي ولو رجعوا يا متعرف ما يدري أول نشان داكي هو شوية باشتان هي شوية كا تواني بيت النمونية كجواز بين لو جاكاري لو يعني نري يعني كدور بركان تان حيانا.
The curse is that everybody around you wants you to fail, and that is the major problem here for you. You have to strike a balance between being this oasis, which so many people wants to visit and be at, and that's why I'm being told that a lot of the Arabs around here are buying up properties here, somewhere to run away to escape to. But the governments you're surrounded by doesn't want that, because the threat for them is that you are this example of something different. And that's why they will never agree to anything getting even close to independence.
أما لاني نكبت يعني لاني خرابي أو وسائك إيه وهتاني وياك جاتي زور تام لا عنده البرتان وتفيقيشة وتاني منيك جوات بس كشكل وامش خزيان مني وأوات بتمنياية وكشيك يقول ده بود جزء ذكاء وجزء كردون بويا دبي خاصية حاجات النيوان يك أو نعمتك روتي كردون كي ودروازيك بود عراق منها وشكا يقول أو نكبتيك أو رجعنا هذا الإيرا نصر بقول بين برويش شو نبشة.
You know how difficult this is? I have no idea what he's saying. Anyway. How you do that? Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Anyway, and I would argue is one of the major problems and challenges for you, to strike this balance and to deal with that. And since I'm also being told that, and this is my own experience with Kurdistan and Kurds, of course, again, something you have in common with the Israelis, you can be self-critical. You argue all the time against yourself and everybody else. And that gives me an opportunity to tell you the other big problem I see here, and that's the internal tension you have here, internally, domestically. The political situation inside your own government. The fact that you have a coalition government that doesn't really agree with each other is, I think, a way for both Baghdad and Ankara and Tehran to try to gain influence here and to undermine the level of independence that you do have. So that, I would argue, is the second big problem for you to deal with that.
دوم كيشي جوري أو يك من دزان كان كردستاني وتوان مناقشات كان رحنا خوتان بدون رحنا برامج بدون وهذا كانت كلاني كدي كي حاو بشو هاو شيء إسرائيلية هذه كتيجة رحنا هيئة الميديا سلا حكومة سلا حزب ده بلام أو كيشي أو بريكتنا بردوامي كالنيوان حزب السياسي كان ده هيئة أما وهذا كا يبتدي زعيم بي ورجبوا نفوزي وطني دراسيتان بتعبد أنكارا حرام بكاتو واتدبر رجلوا لبريكوتن السياسي أحزاب يجي.
The fascinating thing coming here is that there is a disconnect between these two levels. On the one hand, you have a political situation that's very tense, that's very disruptive. On the other hand, all I have to do is walk out the door and I see economic activity, on a level that's kind of hard to see anywhere in Europe, really. And this is happening at the same time.
ليك هذا دوش ثانية وياك يعني وياك بريكوتن سياسي هي تنجي سياسي هي لأنه الأحزاب ده لهما كذا تشدري وأبو جانوا أبو ليك الهرم كوستانا ديريني شتى في السيرة من اشتوام زور كم ديوان.
4 days is not enough to figure that one out, but that's why I'm hoping that you're going to help me tell me how this is possible.
شهر روجا ليرما ناتوانم تبدأ لو يكتشون بريكوتن سياسية لكردستان كشيء أو بوجانوا الاقتصادية لم شهر روجا اللي هو كما بوي كليتين بس يويا مثلاً كتير شون تام تدور.
So the domestic and the regional tensions are combined here in Kurdistan. And that's what you have to deal with, and that's what you have to navigate. And that, I think, is not an unviable position. But that's what you have. This is the hand that's given to you. And what I'm arguing back home is that we could have achieved, we as in Western Europe, could have achieved a lot more in the region if we had followed my advice from the start, or many other people's also, to invest politically and economically where it makes the best sense to do it, namely here. We didn't. So now we have a situation that it's a slippery slope. I think that the metaphor could be, this is a golden egg for people around as well as a threat. Because if your neighbors try to squeeze you too much, the golden egg would stop producing gold eggs. this is something that one would hope that I understand. But again, yeah.
دیسان جوبله مکو أو تنجاني كهانش لسر آسي ولات ناوچه كذا دبي خوبن كبيبين كتشونا بالشيء كبلا دیسان جمن هذا سو قناعتنا كهج صابر ليستهم وكاتبه ما هو أوروبا الغربي كرابورت من الغوبوكا كان بل نصيحتي من الغوبوكا بوبرهنا لهري كردستان دار كان بوبيكا يا متعرض دم باشتيشتا استحارتك جورا وتوزع بلام بيشتا من هذا المجدري هم بو غرب كأوكا بوبرهنا لير ذاك استا حالتك كتيدا وكل وارد ويا كده أنا هاللحظة اشتيتروا بتايبت بلا بتشابكني بلاتاني دراوسيت عن ك يك زخت تامودين ورجنادن ك أو توانستيك حتى أنا بداشت الشيوة خوي بلي.
So the way I see this when it comes to the central government down in Baghdad is, of course, that as long as you can't agree by yourself, Baghdad will keep pushing and pushing and pushing for this disunity to continue, and this is their chance, and that's a double threat, because Baghdad today is to a large extent, not more now than it was when I was here the last time, but more now being influenced to a very large extent by Iran. I was telling my interpreter, that Iraq, south of Kurdistan, is becoming more and more of an Iranian province. That may be going too far, but I would argue that this slippery slope is actually very dangerous, and I think that's exactly what the Iranians are aiming for, and using your disunity against you, and using that disunity from inside Baghdad.
أو ناكو كيكة هيلة حريم كردستان ده جودة فيها رشية برامبر كشيء برامبر تحريم كردستان بغداد تشدل يجريني بلام حظك أو بابلين يقدرانا أو ناكو كي ناو حريم كردستان زيادة هيج مصلحتي الودانية أو ناكو كيكة بابلين كم بيته وبتعرف شو كبدرجية نفوذ هجومي بجرزولي إيران ده من بيشتر بمتجمع كيكون وده من العراق استا وكو باريزغاي في إيران وده حولنا شو.
I don't think it's going to go as far as it did shortly after the period of Daesh and the immediate time after when you had a discussion about independence here. But the risk is there. I don't think it's going to go that far right now. But the fact that Baghdad has that kind of cudgel to beat you with if they want is something to bear in mind, I think. And when one talk about Baghdad, you cannot not talk about Tehran, because as I said, the Iranians are using Baghdad to a very large extent to influence you. Not only that, I don't have to tell you this, but the direct connections with Iran and Kurdistan is also there. It's been there for a long time. But that only adds to the challenge of striking this balance, keeping the oasis being exactly that, an oasis that's not going to threaten anyone. But the mere fact that you are what you are is a threat for these regimes, and that will continue to a very large extent. This is my argument back home when I'm talking about this in Europe, not only in Stockholm. And our problem is this. We're still hooked on the idea that there is a central government. There is a country. The country is called Iraq. There is a capital, Baghdad. Everything has to go through Baghdad.
من حظك مثلا روبريمو أو كشيء جدية كذي بالبرشاو تامريكا إيران تأثير يكون فوزيك يرجع راس الخوف جدية هي لسر بغداد لتوانيك لهر لحظة لهر مرحلة كذا هندي شد دجي خوتام بكار ناكو كان إيوه باشني إيوه دبيبيلوش بیریشتن بو آب چه لوکات داکه هرمی کیواتم درست کردن که گشی دیده بیو باش بی ای کشه بودن تن هم که توانی زوجتن لیور بگیرد و کشه ای من لغرب اولی که حتی اصلا ما ویا که حکوومەتێکی مرکزی هەیە لە بەغدا کە دەتوانێت ئەم کێشانە ڕابگرێت من وای نابینم.
I don't agree with that approach, and I know that a lot of other people don't, but that's the official position of the European Union. You work through the central government. Because that's how things are done here. And one of the arguments I'm using is that you can show by empirical evidence that if you really want economic and political support to weigh in and to really matter, you should not be so hooked up on just going through the central government, especially the one in Baghdad right now. Not necessarily because everybody's bad there, but because they're so tied up with Iran.
بشتي موقفي الرسمي يجري أوروبا ووطني غربية وهي كذا ڕێگەی حکوومەتی مرکزی و داخلی وڵاتێکی وە یارمەتی ئێمە من پێم وایە هەڵەیە ئەم پێم وایە کە گەشەی ئاوری هیچ پەیوەندی بۆ نییە کە حکوومەتێکی مرکزی هەیە کە لە کوردستاندا نیشانداوە.
And when we mention Iran, we can widen the perspective to look at the region as a whole, which of course makes Iran even more of a problem for everybody around here, not only you. And this is another trend that you have I should say this maybe before. The title after the Islamic State is not entirely correct. I mean, the Islamic State is not, it's still there, right? Ideologically, religiously, and politically, it's still a problem, and it's still around. So they haven't disappeared, even though the physical interpretation of it is going to dust. But they're still there, and as long as that is the case, it's going to be a problem. But a problem one can handle. Right.
دیسان جوابی که حکومت مرکزی عراق دارها افلیجا من نایبینیم که بتوانه جالبی که عراق بخویان هری کردستان ده پیوندی بخویان پیوندی ایران و تأثیر ایران کل سریعتی كشيء جوري بلام جينا لوجه إما داعش يشتهر ما داعش لهم هو يكون هو الجيو هو جسدي ولا هو عسكري وهي وجود هي وتعرف كشيء جوري.
But from a regional perspective, Iran is the big problem here, and you can see that after the sort of defeat of the Islamic State, if you like, the military defeat of the Islamic State, and after the fact that the US pulled out more and more from the Middle East, Iran has used that as a way to penetrate, as many countries as they can. I mean, Lebanon is an excellent example, which is an Iranian province, if you ask me, and a failed state on top of that. But the way the Iranians are working on this is to support certain groups, in all countries, gaining influence because there is no built-up structure strong enough to withstand them. You have that still, but it's not a common denominator of the region. And as long as that is not challenged, and the only one who can, if Iran should be challenged regionally, you need foreign support. You need a much more robust European and American support, or the region does. And that, I would like to see that, but I'm not so sure that will be forthcoming anytime soon, which is bad news.
أكيد داعش كشيء والله بس مو كمان أول كداعش جوتين كشيء ونيا إيران كشيء وياه وأول أي لبنان درستي كل وكان لبنان براسي سام حافظ لي كان إيران كتيدا دولة كفاشي ليدرسكت أما بس إيران جدي إيران دواي كشانوي أمريكا يارمتي هندي جنوب هندي ونار داون دربي أوانو نفوذ جزر باشي لوطن درسكتو لبنان سوريا إيران من مكانتي أو جروبان أخوان زوج شوكم طاقتان نيكم قوم كمرة مد إيران إيه ولا فان قوم كان فان هي والله بقول كان دبي يارمتي دروتان هذي كلام يارمتي درو يارمتي في جوري درجة وطني أوروبي أو من ديبين أو يارمتي إسلامية أو نيكا وانش.
Another problem, another challenge that will affect you, but maybe more indirectly, is of course the war in the Ukraine. And the thing here is, I think, that in the best of times, that would give you a chance. That would give you a chance because I think Iran, which is powerful in the region, because we let it be powerful in the region, and we, again, I mean the Europeans and the Americans, It's not a strong country in the sense that they can, throw their strength around. They can do that because we are letting them do that, which is a huge mistake. But the fact that they have supported Russia to such an extent has pissed off a lot of European countries, which is a good thing, because that, at least my experience when I'm talking about these issues in Brussels or Washington or Stockholm, wherever, this is something that that can help push a stronger response to Iran. And as I said, that's a key. That's a key. You will not escape that. You have to deal with Iran if you want to have, a prosperous, fairly peaceful region. There's no escape. There's no way around that. You have to deal with the regime, head on. And to do that, you need to squeeze it. And to do that, you need the Europeans and the Americans. And that's supposed to be my job to convince them.
حظكم ليرة شارك بشر أوكرانيا كلام كشو وضعك كي دفتك بأيه ودرس كذا إيران يارمتك زوري أوكرانيا هذا وزور سيد أوروبا بويا كم جال أوروبا غربي أمريكا زور بيك والجيران ما راح تكذا إيران أجر إيه من نبوينا رجعنا ذلك هذا صلاتي هذا لو نبتشيه صلاتك زوري ولكن شو غرب رجيجة وبداخله بەڵام ئێستا خودی غەرب زۆر تووڕەیە لەوەی کە ئێران نەکردنیان لە وەشڵاتی ناوەڕاست لەوێ یارمەتی ڕووسیادا دژ بە ئوکرانیا ناو دڵی ئەوروپادا ئێوە دەتوانن ئەمە کەڵکی لێوە بکەن بۆ ئەوەی کە غەرب یارمەتیتان بدا بۆ ئەوەی کە ئێران با بڵێن لاوازی بکەن بیشتیان بۆ ئەوەی کە ئەوە بکەن پێویستان بە یارمەتی غەرب بەرێت بەتایبەتیشی ئەوروپا و ئەمریکا و ئەوە ئیشی منە کە ئەم
And I think it would be easier to affect a change in the policy towards Iran than it will be to affect the European change on the policy towards Turkey. Because Turkey, political geography is what it is. Turkey is where it's at, and it's not going to change. So there's no way that I think NATO or even the European Union will squeeze Turkey harder. It's much too important to have them inside the tent than outside the tent. So that's not going to change. But with Iran, it can change. That's, I think, is a pressure point, as the Americans are saying, that we should use to an effect. And I think that may work.
إيران دا جیاوازی هەیە کە تورکیا جەیەکی جغرافی سیاسی زۆر تایبەتی هەیە کە غەرب ناتوانێت زیاتر لەوە زەختی بۆ بێنێت چونکە تەسیر لە وەزعی ناوخۆیی خودی ئەوروپا و ئەمریکا و غەرب دەکات بەڵام بۆ ئێران وانە ئێران زۆر ئاسانتر دەکرێت فشاری بۆ کۆ بکرێتەوە و تەزعیف بکرێت و لەوێدایە پێوە شانسەکان هەیە شتێک بکەن.
And finally, to say something about the countries even further away, like the Gulf countries, which I also understand, if I got everybody right here that I've been talking to, is an important investor. And again, what economic activity, to the extent that I can see here, does tell you is that as long as you have that, there is a certain amount of trust, right, in the system. There's a certain amount of trust that this will hold. For now, at least. Otherwise, you wouldn't see this economic activity. And this is something you should build on, if I may be so bold as to give you an advice here, that you don't have to follow. But I think it shows something that you've done this right. Kurdistan has done this right. Because to keep up this economic activity is, in the end, in the long run, it's a strength, regardless of everything else. Because as soon as the people lose trust in you, they're not going to give you the money. The money's not going to come. So that is one thing I see as a very positive thing here in midst of this pretty bleak picture I'm painting here. But the picture is bleak. There's no reason to pretend otherwise. You have what you have, and that's very, that's what you should build on. And again, that balance, of course, that you need to strike all the time is something I'm glad I don't have to deal with. But the fact that you've come this far, is a sign that I think that you are doing a lot of things correctly here. And just the fact that you have both an economic and a political and a social environment that is different from what you have around here is important, I think. Because again, you know, that the mere fact that you're here, the mere fact that Kurdistan is this oasis, the mere fact that Arabs are coming up here from Mosul and Baghdad during the weekends, you know, they wouldn't do that if they didn't want this. And that's also powerful and something to build on.
جد حظ كم وجد وكو تبيني أخيرا أو بليم ك هر أويك وضعي اقتصادي باشي لكردستان وهذا كوطني خليج جوري لو برهنانيا كبيرة خلقي دولو بربين ليرة شبكرن دانستاني اقتصادي كان نشان ذكر جوري لمتمانة بيرة هي متمانة هي بوي كدمينيتها هیچ کەسێک ئامادەنی لە شوێنێک کە بڕوخێ و بەرهێنان کەواتە ئەوان خۆشیان جۆرێک لە متمانەیان هەیە ئەمە لایەنە ئیجادەکەیەتی کە ئەگەر ئێوە بتانێت بەردەوام نەکەون بەخوا نەخواستە نەکەون کەواتە دەبێ محاولەتن کە وەزعی اقتصادی بەردەوام بێت جۆرێک لە متمانە بەردەوام بێت لەوەدا کە خەڵک بیەوێتی دەوروبەر بێ لێرە بۆ بەرهێنان بکات بەگشتی ئەو ڕوخساری کە من دەبینم ئەو مەشەری کە من دەبینم ئەوەیە با بڵێین کاڵە ناومێدکەرە بەڵام ئەم لایەنە ئومێدوارانەشی تێدایەکە ئومێددا بە گشتی ئومێدبەخشە
ئەو وەکی خوا نەخواستە
God forbid.
Sorry?
You didn't say God forbid.
No, I didn't. I don't think God has anything to do with it. A while ago, a few days ago, I got a question on what I thought would happen in 5 years. And I went back to the hotel and looked into my crystal ball. And the answer is that, and this is the thing, of course, that makes it so difficult. It's not only up to you. It's not only up to you. If you do everything right, if you do get your act together in your own government, it's not necessarily going to help you all the way. You are dependent, as we all are to a certain extent, but you are dependent. You are so dependent on the neighbors. So it's not only up to you. But I would argue that unless we put some more pressure on Iran, you know, this slippery slope that Iraq as a whole is on will continue. You know, the longer we wait to deal with that, the tougher it's going to be in the end. That will be, I would argue, you know, item number one. You have to deal with that.
هەمەکارەنین هەموو شتێک بەدەستی لەوە نییە وەکو جیران دراوسەکانتان کردوان زۆشتان بۆ دروستکەنیان لە ناوی کرد بۆیە دەبێت ئەو جۆرە لە نێوان ئەو دروستکردنی ئەو هاوسەنگی هەبێت کە چۆن بتوان بەردەوام بەڵام لێرەدا کە من دیسان تاکید دەکەم و هەبوونی ئێران کێشەیەکەوەی دروست کردووە لە ناو ئەو دراوسیانە بۆ ئێوە بۆ دەبێت ئەگەر لە شوێنێک معاملە لەگەڵ نەکرێ ئەو لێواری کەوتنە بۆ عێراق زۆر نزیکتر دەکاتەوە.
And the second main item is, of course, your own position as this oasis. A while ago, I think it was yesterday, we went to one of the malls here, and let me tell you this. The malls you have, there's nothing in Sweden that can compare to that. I mean, we have the Mall of Scandinavia in Stockholm, which, you know, can be in the competition, but it's not going to win any prizes compared to what you have here. And only that, you know, it gives you food for thought. But there was a sign at the place, and at the same sign it said prayer room, game land, and what was the third one? You remember, Khaled?
You took a photo.
Yeah, let me check my phone. I took a photo of this.
مۆڵەکانی سویدیش دەبینم کە دەیبینم ئەوان ناتوانانی ئەوە مقارنە لەگەڵ مۆڵەکانی ئێرە زەربەت تایبەت لە سەعود لە شتیوادا ئێرە لە شوێنێکی باشتردایە بەڵام هەندێک ڕسمم گرتووە هەندێکشتی سەریدا بوو شوێنی نوێژ
prayer room, game land and gym.
شوێنی یاری شوێنی ڕیاض.
And that kind of summed it up for me, you know. Don't lose this. Don't lose that, because this is the real what you have here that you don't find anywhere else. Don't lose that.
ئەمە تێکەڵەیەکی زۆر باشە کە هەم بتوانین نوێژ بکەین هەم بتوانین یاری بکەین هەم بتوانین ڕاضە بکەین ئەمە ناسنامەی هێرەیە ناری لەستی بکەن.
So on that happy note.
هەرچەندە باشیش بوو هەندێک ئامۆژگاری و هەندێک ئەوەی کردین. من پێم سەیرە نازانم سوید بۆ ئەوەندە لە رووسیا دەترسێ زندەقی چووە لە کاتێکدا ئەوە 300 ساڵ دەبی رووسیا و سوید شەڕیان نەبووە پێکدادانیان نەبووە لە زمانی سۆڤێتی کە قووەی عوزما بوو سوید محاید بوو حیادی خۆی پاراستە بوو ئەلعان رووسیا لە وەزعکی باشدا نییە کەچی سوید لێ دەترسێت. پرسیاری دووەمیشم نوێنەرایەتی سوید لە کوردستان زۆر کزە لاوازە هەر نییە ئۆفیسێکی بچووکیان هەیە ئەویش هیچی پێ ناکرێ نازانم بۆ لە کاتێکدا دەبووە سوید لێرە دەورەی باڵای هەبووە ئەو هەموو خەڵکە سویدی زۆر کەس لێرە هەر سویدی سویدیە وەنیە پەنابەری زۆری سویدی کورد لە سوید هەن سەفارەتی سوید لە بەغداش ئەویش هەر هیچ پێ ناکرێت ئەو هەر هیچ معاملاتێک مڕازەعاتێک شتێک وەرناگرێت بۆ لەبەر چی ئاخر پرسیارم ببورن وەبەرهێنانی کولتوری و زانستی سویدی لە کوردستان هەستی پێ ناکرێت هەر نییە وا بزانم کە ئەوەش دەورێکی نێگەتیڤ و پەسیڤی سویدە بەرامبەر بە کورد پرسیاری دیش زۆرن ئەمە فەرموون سپاس.
Thank you very much for the speech that you've had. I was hoping that you would talk about Sweden much more because many things that you mentioned we already know them. Obviously, these are facts that we are dealing with every day. But what I wonder is why is Sweden so afraid of Russia?
We're not afraid of Russia. What an insult! Take that back.
Yes, you are. Yes, you do.
I'm deeply offended.
And because Sweden and Russia have not had a fight for the past 300 years. So what's the reason?
Well. Yeah, all right. I'll shoot that down. Okay. Second question.
Why is Swedish representation in Kurdistan so weak or so unrepresented? Given the fact that Sweden has a large population of Kurds.
Right.
And your embassy in Baghdad is doing basically nothing in that area. And why is Swedish cultural and scientific investment in Kurdistan is non-existent?
Right. Well, let me ask you the second part first. The reason is what I mentioned, because you work through central governments. That's why. That's why investment is so low. That's why you go to the embassy in Baghdad. Which again, as I said, I think it's a mistake. But that's the reason for this. That is the reason. To get around that, you need to convince the politicians at the Foreign Office and everywhere else that this is a bad idea. That you get more bang for the bucks if you go through, for instance, Erbil directly. But so far, they're not listening to that, because again, the way to do this is to go through the central government. That's why you have this situation. I couldn't agree more with you that this is a mistake, but that's why it is like this. and Russia.
روسيا.
Russia has been a problem for us for 1,000 years, you know. And it has. We may not have been at war directly with them. Well, in the Second World War, we did fight with the Finns.
You did?
Yeah, we did. We had, volunteer force, but it was by name only because, the government was supporting the forces fighting. We had a division fighting in Finland against the Soviets. So, and I strongly disagree with you when you say we are afraid of the Russians. We are not. Why do you think we want to join NATO for?
هیچ موافق نیمە لەگەڵ زۆر مخالفتم لەوەدا کە دەڵێ ئێمە لە رووسیا ترسین نەخێر ناترسین و لە 1000 ساڵیشە لە کێشەدا بووین لەگەڵ رووسیا و ئاخر جاریش ساڵە لێستانیە لە شەڕی دووەم
So I thought,
لەگەڵ فینلەندیەکان داخلی شەڕ بوونیش بە رووسیا.
hopefully we will join NATO sooner rather than later. But we'll see about that.
هیوادار نبینە ناتۆ کێشەیەک نەبێت.
I would like to say congratulations. I think yesterday was the International National Day.
Yeah, that's true.
500 years, Sweden, and 250 years without war. So this is an...
Well, again, it depends on how you count. Okay, fair.
Yes. So that's what I read and...
Right, sure.
Yes. And, as the doctor said, we Kurds, it's more than 500 years, more than that, We understand many things. We are used and betrayed, and I think we have learned too. So I was happy that you were positively impressed during this time being here. I lived about 37 years in exile in West Germany that time, and then United Germany as student. And because we talked about Sweden, in 1975 I was a student, I was sent from the KDP and the KSSE as a representative to Stockholm to organize the, there were 15 Kurdish students who went inside the Iraqi embassy that time, because they went in to go to be delivered to Baghdad that time.
Right.
And they would be killed. So I remember that time, I stayed about 10 days, and it was a very good positive help, and I think many here, 30 students were they hear some of this were
really?
here. They maybe I came to you with we
Maybe.
Yeah, we yes, okay. So I would say a student Sweden has a very special type of state, etc. When I was studying in West Germany, there were some academics they were talking about, between the fingers, about Kurdistan could be the Schweiz des Nahen Ostens. Die Schweiz des Nahen Ostens. Middle East, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I think about that, what do you think about that?
Well,
Why couldn't be?
no, you
I mean, just you say that our strength is political, and it's economical, and social. I think our strength is the belief, and because we were all, I drank the milk of my mother, My mother drank the milk of her mother, So it was a milk which gave you the strength to defend yourself. And this is the thing which I think others doesn't think or believe in it, but this is our strength. So excuse me, what do you think about, why not?
Well, you could.
Kurdistan.
You could be in Switzerland.
And it would be in the EU or what another region?
The thing, as I said, the thing is, it's not only up to you. You know,
Of course.
The comparison is not really fair because Switzerland is also where it is. And they're not surrounded by enemies who's trying to squeeze her to death. You are. So that's why it's not only up to you. Of course, it could be this, the Switzerland or the Middle East. If it was only up to you, but it isn't. It isn't. So you have to deal with the neighbors at the same time. That's why they have a problem, and that really makes what you have achieved so far even more impressive. Not everybody would be able to do this in such a bad neighborhood as this is. But that's why it's not going to happen soon, because you're not independent in the sense that you can just forget your neighbors. They're gonna be there, so you have to deal with that. That's why you're not going to be the Switzerland in the Middle East.
They have their own problems. Excuse me when
Yeah,
I
they
interrupt.
do.
Yeah, they are.
They do.
دەست خۆش
Thank you.
پرسیارەکە ئەوە بوو کە کوردستان بۆچی ناتوانێت هەرێمێکی وەکو سویسرا بێ وەڵامەکەژەوە بوو کە ناکرێت چونکە ئەوجێی کە کوردستان لێ هەڵکەوتووە وەکو سویسرا نییە جیاوازە و ڕێگەتان پێ
دکتۆر پێشوە
So, I do have 2 points, but kind of questions too. The first point is, you're saying that the Gulf countries and many other parts of the Iraq, they are interested in Kurdistan. As an economist, I want to tell you something. This country you call it Iraq has 2 currencies. One is the dinar, and one is the dollar.
One is the what?
One is the dollar, one is the dinar. Okay? Every fixed asset, every asset in Kurdistan is priced in the US dollar. When you buy a car, they call it daftar. Okay, so they deal with the dollar.
Right.
Fixed asset, land, housing, malls, everything. So the Arab Gulf people, they are not interested in the dinar. That's why they are coming to Kurdistan, besides the security which was offered by the Peshmerga. So the point is here that what I'm trying to make is, the prosperity of the Kurdistan is that, fortunately, it does not have a central bank to print just meaningless currency. So what's happening is the dollar become an unofficial currency of the Kurdistan, and that's why it's attracting the Turkish citizen, Iranian citizen, and Iraqi people. The Lebanese, I have Lebanese colleagues, Jordanian colleagues. They are coming to Kurdistan. Why? Because they are paid in US dollar. And the US dollar.
So you use that as a daily currency. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I'm paid by the US dollar as a university teacher. Okay? So that's the reason.
Right.
And this is the reality. However, unfortunately, I'm sorry, don't get offended, European actually backstabbed the Kurdistan, especially for the court of the Paris. The court of the Paris, they stopped the sale of the Kurdish oil by the Kurds because they had some dealing with Iran or the Baghdad. And this is going to be falling off, and it's going to be a loss for both European Union and the Western world and the Kurdistan as well. Why would it happen? Because after that, what would happen? It will the oil of Kurdistan will be having the same fate of the oil of Iraq. It will be sold to the US dollar, and it will be converted to the Iraqi dinar. So what's going to happen? The central government has open hand to go through the kind of a socialist big government Keynesian economics. So it will be falling into the same economic system which Saddam and the Maliki system was following. And it's going to follow the same to the Turkey and Iran. Why the Iran and Turkey have problem right now? Because they both are printing money. The end of the Ottoman Empire came when they're printing so much money that their soldiers wouldn't accept the money, and then they started looting all places. So that's why they call it the sick man of the world, the sick man of the Europe. So the point is here that unfortunately the Paris court was totally a treason to the Kurdish under the case of the freedom in the Middle East. And I would say that, you as an influential person actually in the EU, I guess, you can have that discussion and open that discussion that the EU as a whole should have a special representative in Kurdistan for economic and political affairs and security. So, and then that bridge through the Baghdad and the central government will be kind of more kind of eased in that sense. So this is very serious because as an economist, I will see that. Okay, right now, you know why there is no inflation in Iraq? Because they're afraid of the Kurdistan. Why? Kurdistan has a dollar. Okay, so if they print money, the dinar in Iraq will fall like 5,000 dinars and $1. Right. So all the money will come to Kurdistan. So that's why this is a collaboration between the Turkey, France, which they stopped the Kurdish oil, and this is going to fall back on all of us.
No, I couldn't agree more. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think we should have a special representative here. I think we should work much more, with the Kurdistan. Just because of that, it works here. But one way of solving at least part of this, wouldn't that be for the government here or the parliament here to agree to implement the constitution that you haven't implemented? Wouldn't that be an important step to solve this problem?
So, constitution and the parliament is a different story. Okay?
I know, but we need the parliament.
Treating the Kurdistan as a special, like the Palestinian case. Treating the Kurdistan as a special case would be a proper way. And right now, Iran is siding with Russia. It's the best time to actually to claim that.
I agree. I think so too. And that's why I'm saying that I think that the war in the Ukraine with Iran supporting Russia could be a cudgel that you could use.
And right now, Turkey is siding with the Russians. So the energy pipeline is almost...
They're selling weapons to the Ukraine. Yes.
So they're right now, I mean, they play the both game. Yeah, they are. The both side. So right now, if you have a special envoy in office with the kind of executive power, they can open up that line and actually with the following.
هیچ خوێندنەوەیەک بوو ئەم کۆمەڵگایە هەیە کە گەشەی ئیسلامی چەند زۆرە و دەسەڵاتی ئیسلامی بیر لەوە کراوەتەوە کە لەوانەیە بێتە سەرکار بەو هەموو هەوڵێک کە دەیدا مەسەڵەن بۆ نمونە بەس ئەو مزگەوتە دژایەتی دینەوانە نییە بەبەستم دیارە بەس ئەو مزگەوتانەی دوای داعش دروست کراون لە بەرامبەر ئەو قوتابخانانەی کە دروست نەکراون ئەو نەخۆشخانانەی کە دروست نەکراون ئەو کتێبخانە ئەو شتانێک کە ملەتێک پێویستیەتی و ئینسانی کورد هەز دەکەم لە لای ئێوە هێشتا وەکو ڕۆبۆتێک دەبینێت کە قەرارە بیجوڵێنن بەڵام ئەم ئینسانانە کولتورێکیان هەیە فەرهەنگێکیان هەیە کە ڕۆژانە ئاو دەدرێ بە ئەفکاری 1400 ساڵ بەر لە ئێستا ئایا مەترسی ئەوە هەیە کە ئیسلام دەسەڵات بگرێتە دەست لە کوردستان بەتایبەت سپاس.
What's your idea about that?
No, that's an excellent question. I do see it as a threat. Not only here, but in the region as a whole. And again, that also goes back to, I think, to Iran to a very large extent. Not only Iran, but also the Iranian way of doing things, of influencing things, is to pour money onto some group or institution that they want to support to help them. It doesn't have to be a Shia; it can be a Sunni as well. I mean, look at the money the Hamas is getting from Iran. So that's how they work. And since they do have enough money to do that kind of stuff, they can help build up institutions and mosques, madrasas and stuff like that, to gain an influence in Kurdistan. So of course it's a threat. But then, again, it goes back to the issue of the constitution here. If I don't, Khaled, you have to tell me if I got this wrong. But the thing is that constitution is secular, right? So that's again an important argument for voting it into implementation, because that would be one way to combat this Islamist threat. It's that kind of, the Islamists has been a threat to, not the first book I wrote, but the second book I wrote was on this, on Islamism. It's called The Victory of Islamism from Lebanon to Iran. It's more than 10 years ago now I wrote that. So that is definitely a huge problem, But then again, Kurdistan, as it is now, and as it could be if you got that damn constitution implemented, is an obstacle towards that. That could, again, be an example of how we can deal with these issues, without falling into the trap here. So yes, it is a threat, and I do see if you could, one way of dealing with it is to push back against the Iranians, push back at the kind of help that they're giving certain institutions and people here. That would be the way to deal with that, and show that there are alternatives. That you don't have to do this, because I would say it's an easy argument to make, to show people that no, you don't have to dress up in a tent to go out, to have a drink or a cup of coffee. You don't have to do that. Just by example, you are an important part in this struggle. So, and again, it goes back to what you said about the European Union here. That's also a reason, I would argue, for the European Union to be much more combative, if you like, or not aggressive, but offensive in its way to, the difference between offensive and offensive in English, I hope. Offensive in the way of, pushing forward to help Kurdistan. Because again, it shows, it is an example of how you can deal with tensions without, falling into the Islamist trap.
Can I just a question? Constitution referring to Iraq constitution or the draft?
No, the draft.
Which we don't have.
Exactly, yet. No, that's the thing.
بدڵنیایی ئەوەی جەناب دەیڵێ کە بەڕۆژ ئەمە مەترسیە مەترسیی زۆر گەورەشە ئیسلامیزم ئیسلامی سیاسی یان ئیسلامی توندڕۆ کێشەیە کێشەیەک دەبین من دیسان دوو حەل هەیە یەکەمیان دیسان دەگەڕێمەوە بۆ ئێران وەلا ئێراندا ئێوە بە هەڵدا مەچن ئێران بەستنیە یارمەتیشی عەنادە حەماس سیر کرد کە چی بەسەر ئیسرائیل هێناوە ئێران لە پشتێکی وپاران لەداخل بەسەڵاتی اقتصادی هەیە و دەتوانێت هەموو لەحزەیە کێشەی کۆمەڵایەتی هەرگۆتان بۆ دروست بکات ئەوەی دووەمیان دەستوری ئێوەیە دەستوری عێراق دەستوری کوردستان کە هەموومانە بەڵام دەستورێکە کە زۆر سێکولارە و زۆر ئەڵمانیە کە دەتوانێت ڕێگەلەوە بگرێت خەڵک بچێت مەشروبش بخواتەوە بچێتە مزگەوتیش و ئەو فەزایە لەدەست نەدەن کە هەتان ئێستا و ڕێگە لە ئیسلامیزمش بگرێت
Academy l'ingolese كم استناد كم سنة تجربة كده دكتور إشكالي كم أول مسؤول عن من دو سرنزم هي كره هاد بشيء وين زوري كله بيام شو زمان يباسي كده الدولة شراوي إشكالي هي وتحاجة أوروبية مولات كي خويا مولشة كان هذا كويتر ليش شراوي زور باسي ويرسونا كاني إمام إسرائيلي بەڵام یەک وێک نەچوونی زۆر جەوهەری و استراتیژی باس نەکرد کە دوای پێم بڵێ بۆ باسی نەکرد ئەمیشەوەی ئەوان دەوڵەتن ئێمە نا ئەمە یەکێک لە قسەیەکە یان لە پەیامەکانم چوونی تێگە هیچ دووەمیان بەڕاستیدا ئەو لە من باشتر ئەزانێت کە بە تایبەتی لە دوای ئەوەی کە دوای جەنگی جیهانی یەکەمەوە هەتا ئەگەینە ئێستا لە جەنگی جیهانی یەکەم لە جەنگی جیهانی دووەم و لە جەنگی سات وحتى أجينا أمره لزنجي داعش زنجي إرهاب لهذا هميدا هميشة كل مشاري هو بأصل جازية لو دوايانا بأصل زور كلام مشار بجدار ولا لو حمل جهانية لدجي داعش ولا لدجي إرهاب بيش داعش يشبه الذي ما نسي لقى قاعدة شروا ما كتبوا كل كان قاعدة هذا كردستان غيره شرط ولا برامبر يعني لو فيزيكية ويكتر أول دعوة صغيرة بەڵام لەو کاتەوەتا ئێستا هەمیشە کورد نائومێدە کرێ من پرسیارێک لە بەڕێزی ئەەکەم نەتەوەیەک 100 ساڵ هەر بێئومێد بکرێ بێئومێد بکرێ حەزەکەی با نازانم لە چۆ بێزاری وا خەڵک لەخوا هەڵەگەڕێتەوە کە زۆر بێئومێدە بێ بۆ لە دۆستەکانیشی هەڵاگەڕێتەوە یعنی احتیمالی ئەو هەڵگەڕانەوەیش بۆ کورد ئەوروپا ئەبێ هەمیشە لە بەرچاوی بێت کورد بێئومێد کراوە دووە دەستەواژە لەو بێئومێدکردنە کتێبی نوێی کاکسەرۆ قادرە كناوي لناوا ندويشي سزادراو طبعا ناوا روكي جوري كم نامي باسي كم ان شاء الله كاكسر اخوي با طريقيك شتي كتبوا بريكات تمام ناقصك هي درك كرد يعني تكمل مسؤوليه الاستاذ
said that he's an author, so he speaks as an author, and he had two observations. First, the similarities between Israel and Kurdistan. You mentioned that, and of course there are similarities, but you never mentioned any differences between the two entities. One is Israel.
Yeah.
One is a state.
Sure.
The other one is not a state. You didn't refer to that. And let me just say that we have been at war with extremism, not just with ISIS and Daesh, but even before that, with Al-Qaeda and any kind of extremism that existed. But the level of support that we have had from our friends, and by friends he means the West, is disappointing. It's not the first time that we are disappointed at the support that we should get and we don't get, and the result is to the detriment of the Kurdish affairs in their own country. And then he referred to a book that was written by Kaksaro about that kind of affairs between the kind of support that the US shown for the Kurds or the non-existence of the support. What is your opinion about that? What is your opinion about the lack of support for Kurds?
I thought I was pretty clear on that, in my lecture, saying that I wish there was much more. I was arguing for that, and I've been arguing for that for many, many years. So I agree with you. I think it is a disappointment. But again, I think to a large extent, if you look at why Sweden as a nation or why European countries as a nation isn't doing more, it's exactly this, as I'm repeating myself here. But it's because you work through central governments, and the argument is, of course, that you have to try to change that attitude. But as long as that's the case, this problem will remain. It's not going to go away just because we wish it. So I agree with you. I think it will be better if it will be a lot more. But it's not. It's a political discussion we need to have back home, which is very difficult to change. And it's actually, I would argue, it's even more difficult now because each and every country within the European Union has to take the European Union into consideration when you're dealing with it. So it's much harder today to be independent of the Union than it was before, which actually adds to the problem. The flip side of that is, of course, that if you do manage to make a change here, it will affect the whole Union, which would be very good.
You mean if Sweden did that?
Yeah, well, any country could do that, but it would probably affect the whole Union, not only one country. It could be.
كوربي موافقم لەگەڵ کاگازە دەبوایە ئەو یارمەتی کە غەرب بەرامبەر یعنی دۆستەکانی کورد دەکەن وەرەی کوردستان دەبوایە زیاتر پێ من لە محاضرەکەشم ئەوم گوتم کە دەبوایە زۆر زیاتر بێت تەرکیزم سەرۆ کرد کە دەبێت و پەیوەندی و هاوکاریە زۆر زیاتر بێمە باسیشم کرد کە ئەگەر هەرێمی کوردستان بیەوێ شتێ بکات دژ بە ئێران دەبێت یارمەتی ئەوەی هەبێەوە ئەو یارمەتی من ئێستا نایبینی میش ڕێک قسەی جەنابتم کرد بەڵام تا دێ ئەم جۆرە پەیوەندی لە نێوان کوردستان و یەکێتی ئەوروپا ئەوێ قورستر دەبێت غەرب نەک یەکێتی ئەوروپا چونکە یەکێتی ئەوروپا ئەوەی خۆی هەیە یاسای خۆی هەیە لەگەڵ حکوومەتی مەرکەزی معاملە دەکات وەک کێشەیەکی زۆر گەورەیە هەتا ئێستاش من دژی ئەوە مەکەوا بێ بەڵام ئەگەر بێت و یەکێک لە وڵاتانە و جورئەتە بکەم مەسەلەن سوید بێ لەگەڵ هەرێمی کوردستان پەیوەندیکی باشتر بکە ڕەنگە تەئسیری هەبێت لەسەر کۆی یەکێتی ئەوروپا ئەوەی من دەیبینم ئێستا ئەوە نییە بەداخەوە بەڵێ گوتی باش شتێک گوتی منیش ئێوە ناومێدم پێوێدم
talk and I would agree with you, your advices you have given how to make things easier for us. But at the same time, I think the core problem of our issue, because we are Kurds, that is our core problem. As you know, Kurdistan is divided between 4 parts, and any part gets any rights, all the neighboring countries will see it as a threat to them. That's why it is one of the issues. It's an age-long problem, and we have to live with it, and we have to know how to deal with this matter. But what I am talking about, really, I would have liked to see your view about what the European countries view about the changes is happening in the Middle East and the the area here, there are a lot of changes happening, and you see there is a lot of political movements around. You could see lots of countries getting together, getting away from each other, and that would the European countries' position toward this changing situation is going to be the same as before, or you foresee a development in that way? That's one. And regarding the Kurds, I mean, I have to say especially about the KRG or the Kurdistan region, I have to say we have been very disappointed with the stand of European Union countries in a way. Yes, individual countries do help us, and they have helped us, and we thank them for that. But when it comes to important issues, like for example the referendum, we see all the world-loving democracy and human rights. They are shocked. How come Kurds ask for referendum for defining their future? This is very disappointing to us. Even with the problems we have, we don't ask you to, or we don't ask the European countries to act in a way interfering into the internal affairs of Iraq as a whole, but they could play a much better role in, for example, the problems we are having with Baghdad. Are the Europeans going to leave the matter like it has been for the Iranians, for the Americans? If there is any role, is there a Kurdish policy, European Kurdish policy, as an individual countries and as a European Union?
Saudi Arabia, yeah, right. I think, this is, Let's talk about Syria, because that's a good example of how things turned out wrong. What the signal with re-inviting Syria, for instance, to the Arab League, is that crime pays. You can kill hundreds of thousands of your own people. You can drive them out. You still, if you're standing still after 10 years, you're going to be readmitted. That's a very, 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 very bad signal to send. And I'm afraid that's exactly what's happening right now. And I don't think there is a. Well, I'm sure if you're asking the European, the presidency, or if there is a Syrian policy, you will probably get a piece of paper saying stuff that no one really. There's no such thing as European Union policy towards Syria or towards Saudi Arabia, because what the European Union is not, it is not a political union. Even if you can hear zillions of Europeans saying that it's a political, it's a social and economic union more than anything else. The politics is tagged along, but it's not a political union. There's no such thing as a European Union policy that really is concrete on that many issues at all. So no, you won't find that, I think, and I think your best bet, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, because that was never the idea, and would be a stupid idea to begin with. So your best bet is still to work on individual countries, I think. And I absolutely agree with you that could be much more powerful. We could be much more supportive of Kurdistan. But that's been my argument all along. But if you're looking for the European Union to have a powerful, assertive, offensive idea on anything here, I think you're going to have to look long and hard without finding it, because that will be very, very difficult. And the reason is very simple. How are you going to get all these countries to agree on anything, really? That's not going to happen soon. So your best bet will be to go for individual countries and build powerful blocs within the Union. Take the Scandinavian countries, for instance. They could be a powerful ally. But the Union, no, I don't think so.
So you mean that the Kurdistan from seen of a European is just an economic entity, it's not a political entity, in terms of importance?
Yeah, no, I would argue that the European Union, the strength of the European Union is exactly that. It's an economic and social union. You know, there is ambition to be a political actor. There is an ambition, but it's not working. And of course it's not working. How are you going to get the French and the Germans to agree on anything in the Middle East? It's not going to happen. So, and that's what I'm saying. You know, if you want to change this that way, you know, you're going to bang your head against the wall without anything really happening.
Right now, Iran is in shambles, and there's a main opposition group in Iran which is pro the Shah.
Yeah,
and the Germans are supporting that. So we are, at least we can ask the Europeans should not support the opposition. They are totally racist, totally pro-Shah, and they are totally kind of it's worse than
عراق و لبنان بۆتە پارێزگایەکانی وڵاتی پارێزگایەک لە ئێران و یەمەنیشی لەبیر چوو یەمەنیش بەنگار وا بێ پرسیارەکە ئەوەیە ئەمە خەتای چێ؟ ئایا خەتای ئەوروپایی و ئەمریکایەکان نییە کە ئەو فراوخوازی ئێران ئەو زەمینەی هەیە کە ڕۆژ بە ڕۆژی زیاترە بێ بەهێزترە بێ کە وای کردووە تەنانەت بگاتە هەوشەی ئەوروپایەکانیش ئێستا لە ئوکراین و ئەو سیستی ئەوروپا لە ناوچەکەدا وای نەکردووە کە دۆستەکانی ئەوروپا ئەمریکا زیاتر بێ ئومێد بن و هەوڵ بدەن پەیوەندیەکانیان کە چەندین ساڵە ناکۆچیان هەبووە لەگەڵ ئێران وەکو سعودیە و وڵاتانی خەلیج پەیوەندیەکانیان ئاسایی بکەنەوە لەگەڵ ئێران ئەوەی کە ڕووەدا ئایا بە دەرەجەیەک ئەوروپایەکان خۆیان بەرپرسی لەوەی کە ڕوویداوە ئەوەی پرسیار
Executive editor, yes. Chef redactor.
Oh, chef redactor, okay.
And his question is, you mentioned Iraq and Lebanon as being provinces of Iran, which is correct. Maybe you also should have mentioned Yemen, which is the same thing there. But who is to blame for this kind of development in the region? And don't you agree that the kind of position that the West, America and the EU, European countries, have towards their friends in the region, not only Kurds, of course, has created a situation where Iran is being benefited by new alliances with Saudi Arabia, with the Gulf countries, and when they see that the support from the West is not there, of course they're turning to old foes to become new allies. What do you think of that?
Well, as I said, that's exactly it. We are allowing Iran to be as strong as it is today, not because they really are that strong, but because we're not trying to stop it or to push back against it. So of course it's a matter of politics and how you deal with these countries, of course. But there is an additional problem, of course, and that is the fact that the Middle East as a whole do have a lot of weak states. You can have a strong regime in Tehran, which you do have. It's a tough nut to crack. But the state is pretty weak. Same with Iraq. And Lebanon is not even a state any longer. It's a complete failure. So, and yet, when you as a European country or any country, you're going to deal with these individual weak or failed states, what are you going to do? How are you going to do that? It's a huge problem. So I can understand the fact that the Europeans, when we deal with Iraq, we deal with Baghdad, because it's an entity we can deal with, right? My argument is that we should, widen the perspective here, as I've said before. But in a region where you have so many weak and sometimes failed states, it's kind of hard to know exactly whom you're going to deal with. And there are, I don't have to tell you that, but there are numerous examples of this and how difficult it is. So, you know, I'm attached to a US think tank in Washington Institute for News Policy, so I've spent a lot of time there. And it's easy enough to see, if you look at the Middle East, you know, from the United States, and you try to figure it out, this area. It's not easy. You know, it's not easy. So I can understand that there are problems here. None of that changes the fact that I agree with you. We should support Kurdistan more, because again, it's an example that's worth supporting for all the right reasons. But it's not that, it's, you know, if it was only up to me, you know, but it isn't. And the individual national countries will have to deal with the whole, you know, patchwork of groups, entities, actors who are pushing, pulling, you know, in all kinds of directions. And that's why you have that. And that again, your best, you know, your sharpest sword here, your best ammunition is that sign I was quoting. And the fact that you can show that putting your money, your political assets in Kurdistan gives you something in return, right? You build something stable, something prosperous, something that can be an example for the whole region. That's my argument. That is my argument. And that's what you should push. You know, the Kurdish story is fantastic. I'm amazed that there haven't been more Hollywood movies about that, you know. Talking about David and Goliath, you know, you have it all. But there isn't. There isn't. So, and that makes it, you know, also a much longer haul. But those are the main reasons, I think, that it's so difficult. You know, I can't remember how many discussions I've had in the US, in Washington and elsewhere. I'm trying to, you know, you get questions like, can you explain the Middle East to us? You know, think about that. And I said, no, I can't. I can give you hints, but I can't explain it. But that goes for many meetings. But those are, I think, are the main, you know, the main reasons for this situation.
حەزەکەم بڵم هاوڕامە لەگەڵ زۆر ڕاستە ئەوەی کە هەیە لە هۆکارەکە چییە کە وایە بەو شێوەیە کە دۆخێکی ئاوا لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاستە هەیە پەیوەندی بە دەوڵەتی زەعیفەوە هەیە کە لەو ناوچەیەدا هەن هەتا ئێران کە حکوومەتێکی زۆر بەهێزی هەیە کە بە ئاسانی ناڕوخێ خاوەنی دەوڵەتێکی بێهێزە دەوڵەتێکی لەرزۆکە دەوڵەتێک نییە کە بتوانێت هەموو شتێک کە هەر بۆ یەشەکە اینجا بۆ نمونە لبنان باسی لبنانی کردیان عێراق کار دەوڵەتی نییە دەوڵەتێکی فاشلە ئەوەی کە من پێم وایە دەبێ بکری هەر بەنسبەت هەرێمی کوردستان ئەوەیە کە ئەوەی پێشتر باسم کرد هەرێمێکە کە کۆمەڵێک زەمینە و دەرفەتی دروست کردووە وەکو شوێنێکی باش سیر دەکرێت و ئەو شوێنە باشە وای کردووە کە وڵاتانی دراوسێ بێنوبەرهێنانی لێ بکەن سەیری دەکەن حەز دەکەن بێنە ناوی ئەمە پەرە پێ بدرێ بەڵام وەزعی ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست هەر جارێک کە من چوومەتەوە ئەمریکا لیان پرسیوم بۆم شەرح بکەن کە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست بۆ وایە من هەر شەرحەم بۆ کردبوون کە ئێستا لەگەڵ تۆ باس بکرد دەوڵەتی زۆر زەعیفی لێیە گروپی لێ نەکاسان ئیدارە دەدرێن بۆ دوجار مەساڵحی دژ بە یەک ئەو وەزع دروست دەکەن لە عێراق و یەمەن و شوێنەکانی تر کە باس کرد.
Very happy to have you here. I would like to point out 2 points, which will help us to come kind of conclusion. The first one is the demography, back to demography of Iraq. It shows us that we have a median age of 21 in Iraq. And cross-country data in the world of past 200 years shows us those countries who have that median age, they are weak in institutions, they are weak in government, governance, human capital, you name it. And on the top of that Iraq has this situation. For example, say until 2040, they will not be able to benefit from the demographic dividend.
They will not be able to.
They will not be able until that. So from now to 2040, On the top of that, you have the Iranian influence. And the main structure of power in Baghdad is militias. So you are going to have a government run by militias for a long period to come. And all these youths that in Iraq now are coming up, entering the labor market, they are going to be absorbed by the militias because the government does not have enough capacity. That shows us in Kurdistan that we cannot rely on all our agreements and papers we sign with them. So we have to be very, very pragmatic. You know, from 6 months, 5 months, 1 year, what we achieve with them. And the platform of, because when you want, we need to have allies. We cannot survive without allies, this Kurdistan region. And the basis of having allies is that your system of governance should be compatible with the system of allies. The avenue of cooperation between here and, for example, the European Union is not, as you mentioned, the political, because the union itself doesn't have political unity. You know, I mean, it's just economic and social and all this. So, working on the quality of governance here, it is a field of cooperation between here and individual countries in Europe, Sweden, Norway, Germany, all of that. It offers a very wide field of cooperation that we can work together both for strengthening here and involvement of Europe and pushing back the failed and bad guys. I think I should stop.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. No, I agree with that. I think, you know, again, it's a repetitive answer, but what you have been able to do so far is pretty impressive, you know.
But not enough.
No, it's not enough. No, it's not enough. No, it's not enough. And if you can, that's what I'm saying, that it would be more, I think it will be easier, if that is the correct word to use here, to work with, you know, individual countries and say, turn over, hey, we need some serious help with building up this kind of institution, this kind of institution, because you build from the ground up. You know, that's very important. So yeah, I think that's the way you should do it, because again, political geography is not going to change. Your neighbors, I'm afraid, it's not going to go away or become nice overnight.
You never choose your neighbors.
You have to deal with them as they are, I'm afraid. So you need allies, and the way to build that is exactly this. You know, to concrete points instead of asking for, you know, recognition of the European Union. That's not going to happen. I could be very much for that, but it's not going to happen anyway. So don't go for that, but it's not going to happen. Go for the individual, go for the concrete. You mentioned you have to be pragmatic and practical. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And you build that strength from the bottom up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask?
Can I ask something off the subject?
Off the topic, right.
زور باشا سپاس. دو خاطر. خاني كم من صدر صد موافقي برزيان ك باسي أود كان كتهديد داعش لا زال قائمة هي. چونك أو فاكران يقول تقوي سرطان داعش بداخل هالماو وبداخل خاطرانش أبدين خاطر تاريخي وسيكولوجي وفكري وكلتوري وتحت بداخل أيضا تجربة الشيء نصري خالي دوام سياركم هي يعني من تنزل بوم رخصة بسيارة تنزل سكولك أو فيش بتم ولا مجابك قانون يعني ولا يرتون سياركش أويا لأنه داعش دياديك طبعا داعش ريخصنيت يا سباي شيء جهاني طبعا دخل كتير ده وخلكي أوروبي وهنا نت أوروبي متجن سياسي دومسية لأنه داعش كزور شركر بون زور ضرب بون زور تشتر بون لا لو داعشاني كخماري إنه بيرم ده بيش مريكان كدهاتنا ولا شر راس إيمان ده موصول داعش موصولة تعرفين كان زور حسن ده خول مجاري يعني في لوديك مكان يك كتب لك الشر بيش مرجع حمرك تقاندو لأنه حمرك شهر بنز كسيت دارو يكي كردو داعش كرد يكي ليبيو يكي تشيكو يكي ألمانيو ده براسي جدي صار سرمان أو يكي شون يقول لك ده دوين فحزة كم أجر توضيحك ده مثلا أوروبيا داعش أوروبيا أورجينال كان اسمه.
I totally agree with you. ISIS is a real threat and continues to pose a real threat to the security of the region of Kurdistan. And it still exists because the supporting facts remain. I mean, what created ISIS still is there. So it is a threat. But I have a question that I've asked many European specialists about security and ISIS, and that is, I met many ISIS members before. Of course, he was working with the president then,
right,
during the ISIS war, and there were members of ISIS which were of European descent, not Muslims, not people from the region, but European by nationality. Yeah. And many of them were much more fundamentalist than Kurds or Arabs.
Right.
Do they have any religious belief, or how come they serve within such barbaric institution?
Well, you should read my book on that. It's in English and Swedish, so that should cover the room, I think. On the Islamic State, because I'm dealing with that. It's an excellent topic and an excellent question that we are still dealing with. For instance, Sweden, I'm sorry to say, had on proportion, many volunteers to the Islamic State, more so than most countries in Europe. I think only Belgium had more, proportionally. And that the thing is that should be a cautionary tale, as they say. And very often, I don't know if you know the expression "holier than the Pope." If you have converts, or people who are discovering or rediscovering their religious tradition, they often become very, very religious. Especially if they come from a tradition like Sweden, which is a secular country to a very large extent. You think you rediscover your real roots. I don't think we should underestimate the power of that. We do that all the time because again, it's a secular country. We have. So, but that is really off topic. But it's one of my main research topics, and this is. As long as you don't, this is a Muslim problem. This is an Islamic problem. It's an Islamic problem because if you don't have a discussion, an internal discussion, and a reform discussion about what is it, it's not going to change. I can scream my head off. I can scream until I'm blue in the face, saying you have to reform. You have to deal with this internally. It's not going to make a difference unless it's happening inside the religious tradition itself. Now, we as Christians did that many years ago. The Jews have done this as well. You have a tradition, not you, but Islam also have traditions of reform-minded, groups and organizations and stuff. But that major discussion, debate within Islam happened in the 12th and the 13th century. and the reformists lost. They lost. But unless and until you have that discussion within Islam, you will have, features like the Islamic State popping up now and then, again and again and again and again. You need that break between religion and politics, and you need it fundamentally. You need a break. You need that break, and if you don't have that, you can never ever have a full democratic liberal country. You need to separate religion and politics. Unless you do that, it's not going to work. And Islam has not done that yet. I'm not saying it's possible, but that is the key question here. So I'm glad you brought that up.
زۆر سپاس بۆ کە پرسەت خستە ڕوو لە ڕاستیدا سوید دوای بەلجیکا زۆرترین ڕێژەی ئەو کەسانی هەیە کە هاتوونەتە ناو داعش ئەنجا من کتێبێکم هەیە لەوبارەی کە دەکرێت بیخوێنیەوە ئەویژەوەیە کە زۆر جار کەسانەی کە ڕوو دەکەنە دینێکی نوێ باوەڕێکی نوێ لەوانەیە کە باوەڕەکان هەیە وترن گەرمە تەریقەتن نییە زۆر زیاد چونکە هەست پێ دەکەن خۆیان دۆزیوەتەوە نییە جاوە لە هەموو شتێکدا ڕووەدا ئەوانەی کە ڕووشیان لە داعش کردوەوەیە بەڵام تاو کاتێک کە ڕێگە چۆنە ڕێگەکردن ئەوەیە کە دەبێت مناقەشەتان هەبێت دەبێت ریفۆرم هەبێت لە ناو دیندا وەکو چۆن ئێمە هەمان.
My last point was the most important one.
Absolutely.
Just making sure.
ریفۆرم بوو و چاکسازی بوو لە ناو دیندا ئێمە هەمان بووە ئێوەش دەبێت هەتان بێت تاو کاتێوتان نەبێت بەم کێشانە علاج ناکەن. خۆبال لە خزمەت داین.
كاكتها
مشكلة بيجاوبوا كذا لازم يعمل شنو
أخذناه ما من سيابات هيك نداي أجل مجال ما سيارة جنابك تشوار دايرين كاكتها كلام.
Warm welcome to Kurdistan, Mr. Magnus.
Thank you, Tal.
I'm glad to see you here. I have 4 questions. I think some are relevant, some maybe are needed to be discussed. One of the issues is that you mentioned 2 important factors, neighbors and disunity as a threat to the Kurdistan region. This is important findings. But one thing that I noticed in your speech is that, and I can see now in different state departments in the West Wall, while Iraq has in 2005 adopted a constitution that Iraq is a federal country, terms that are used by you as a friend, as a scholar, is central, which raises questions for me. Why? This is one question that I would like to, and I can see from federal democracy to, we can see about stability. We have lost the dream that we had and the support that we need in that aspect. 2 is that separation of powers in all countries is very essential. We can see now that Iraqi Supreme Court has been replacing all elected bodies in Iraq, which is a threat to Kurdistan's development. For example, beside the oil, beside the other issues, parliament, they dissolve the parliament. If you can come to the softer issues, an Islamic person in Halabja asked to abolish the monogamy that former Prime Minister has been working so hard, His Excellency Nichiban Barzani, that polygamy is prohibited in Kurdistan region, and it has been a very important step, but we can see now it is abolished by Supreme Court. And there is a silence from the Western democracy.
Wait, have the Supreme Court said that
it is possible? Yes.
It is allowed.
It is allowed. And we can see a silence from the European countries, and which is very important because this is not a sticky issue like other political issues that Europe could be. So we can see one power which is not constitutionally constructed because it was according. Khalid is more expert about this issue. It was after before this This has to be changed. Otherwise, it threatens all. We can see from the decision they are making, mostly they are politically motivated, and they are judges that are not independent. So that is very important.
Right.
I would be happy to see if there is a possibility for you as a scholar and a friend. I consulted with Kaxer also to evaluate these 20 years you have been here since 18 years ago and now. Where we have been, where we are heading, what are the achievements, what are the problems, what are the advices.
The crystal ball again.
Yeah, this is the, and this oasis that everybody is talking about is attacked and it is not defended. And we can see more and more unitary formulas are adopted to Iraq. Central Iraq, central, which is undermining all achievements since 2005 especially. And Kurdistan region is a constitutional entity. But we can see a kind of visits, support, but I think we need more. Thank you.
Right. No, you're right. Excellent points. You know, the first issue here on why you use words like the center of power. I mean, the United States is a federal country, but you still talk about the capital. You still talk about Washington. It doesn't really, they don't necessarily contradict each other. You know, it's still the capital. And so that I would just say that that's not, the importance is not in the name. The importance and the problem for you and for people like me is that European countries treat it as such. You know, they treat it as the capital in, you know, in a federal country, which is really almost a confederation, if you're asking me, a political scientist. And again, the argument shouldn't be what you call Baghdad. The argument should be to go for that fact that you can actually, within the constitution, you're perfectly free to work on the districts, for instance in Kurdistan. You don't have to go through Baghdad. That's my argument. You can do that without, you know, risking anything. So the argument, the issue is not what you call Baghdad. It is essential, you know, the central power in a sense, because it's a government, it's essential, the capital city of a country. But that doesn't in any way change the fact that the argument should be that you could still work through Erbil. You don't have to go through Baghdad. But that's an argument to make to, you know, towards the European countries. It really doesn't really have to be stopped by the constitution at all. I would argue. Now the separation of powers. You're right. For that to work, you know. Again, I'm using the American example because it's such a good example. The way for it to work is that you have to build the institutions to support it, right? That doesn't go overnight. It takes a long time. And it's going to be a long job for you as well to do that. So the fact that, you know, the Supreme Court here, for instance, as you say, can do this is of course based on the fact that you don't have a body of laws that hinders this. But I'll tell you what, I bet you most politicians in Europe don't have a clue about this. They had no idea that polygamy was allowed in Iraq. If you ask someone, I would bet, you know, $100 on the fact that they don't know this. I think it would be an excellent point to push, to say, this is what you're supporting. That would be a real powerful argument, not least in Sweden, you know. A real powerful argument. I'm going to use it myself, because I didn't know this. I thought it was illegal, because you know, it's illegal here. And then the Supreme Court of Iraq says, no, it's allowed. So that's an excellent point, and I'm going to make. But, you know, most people, I'm sure they don't know about this. They have no idea. But again, you have a Supreme Court in Iraqi Supreme Court, but for that to work, it has to be based on laws. I mean, every single state in the United States has a Supreme Court. There is one federal one in Washington, but all the states have the same kind of institutional backup and build up with, the state of Kansas, the state of Arizona, everyone has a Supreme Court. You don't have that. And until that structure is built, you need that from the bottom up. So that's why. But I would strongly advise you to push for that argument and say this is because it's an excellent example of what happens when you impose, when you say you institute a Supreme Court without the fundamentals below it. That's never going to work. I mean, that's what Iraq has done now. That's why you get a decision like that. It's an extremely good example of how things should not be done.
Thank you.
I think I got you all your points, right?
The
assessment.
Cooperation between the Institute, Washington Institute,
Yeah.
about the 2 decades of the credentials.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if that's a suggestion.
Yeah, right. Well, it's been 4 days, so as I said at the beginning, I'm impressed by, it's not the same city. I remember Erbil as a village, when I was here. A small village. I took a picture from the Citadel when I was here the last time.
Which year was it? Exactly.
Sorry?
Which year was it?
2005. And you see these low buildings, low structures, pretty poor. And today, I was there the other day, it looks like downtown Chicago when you look at it. It's amazing. And it's more than just, it's more than that. We had lunch, me and Khaled today, and you drive around the city, you see all these shops, the restaurants, and you think, how the heck can this sustain itself? Because obviously there are money here, And again, as long as you have that, it means that someone thinks that this structure is going to be secure and safe enough for me to invest my money in it. So there's a huge change for this since I first came here. And it's interesting in many ways. I'm not going to go on too long for this, but just let me say this is a final point here. The fact that, again, you've done that in the present situation is pretty darn impressive. Pretty darn impressive.
Thank you very much. Kakemi? بس تقال زور باكل تشوف يوم ما توا أو
بشارك ما أقول لسه البرلمان السويد البرلمان السويد أنصار من جيسة ياساي وبربنوي كيلو الاتفاق بشكل كرداني السويد لواني كنا خوازنا لواني كنا برنواني الغريب وزنامي أولاتا ترسيشان لو حكمة النوية السويد هي كبارتي تندرو بارتي بارزقراني راسلو مصر حكمة اتفاقات هي لبيني ولاتي سويد ولبيني ولاتي تركيا اتفاقات جيجر بجيلة سر بس نازمي ترسكيا نيجرانيا كآية ولاتي سويد كسمعة جدوانية لنويتشتي أوروبا نوي اتحادي أوروبي وصالة هاي صالة دعمي قصي كردي كدوا برسياركي من أويا زور بكتي آية أكيد مترسك هي لسر در براندريان مثلا در كردني كردكاني سويد بشكل كردكاني سويد أو بشريكة جروبك هي ضمنيان كمترسيان لسر رجل رجانا وأنا رجدان جاي بلان بعام آية أو كرداني كحكومة كونتاكت مان هي لولاد السويد كيس مترسية كان لسر هي كلولاد السويد يعني دوسكاس
كردي آسایی هاولاتي
بله اسلام مثلا كردي شيء زور نيجران مثلا بحكم اتصالات ما نبدأ أو ياساي برنجار بنوي كيلور كمان جسد بريا ياساي كفرصة مثلا رنجا باني ولات سويد خاصة قريبه أو اتفاقي لقى ولات تشوف وشغلات هنا وراس بيجي أو ولاتاني كا مثلا سبعة مثلا كيلور أو ياساي زي بزوجة.
Turkey, not Kurdistan, of course. I mean, you have PKK members in the country which could be targeted and sent back to Turkey because of that. Like,
no.
Is that a risk?
First of all, we don't have an agreement with Turkey. Utlämningsavtal,
okay.
We don't have an agreement with Turkey to exchange prisoners. That's the first one. The second is that laws cannot be retroactively used in Sweden. You cannot. The law was implemented on June 1st. this last Friday. So what happened before that is and the PKK has been a terrorist, designed as a terrorist organization since 1988, in Sweden as well. That is not new yet. It's always been the case. So if the difference, now compared to before, is that if you do something now, you will end up in prison. Again, an exchange of prisoners, that's a very long haul, because you can't do that even with countries that you have an agreement with if you are afraid that something's going to happen to them. That's already illegal in Sweden. You can't, you have to think long and hard. And it's not going to be a hard argument to say if you send a Kurdish prisoner to Turkey, they're going to be in deep shit, right? You don't have to be that smart to understand that. So that's not going to happen.
Okay.
But if you do something as a PKK member in Sweden now, after June 1st, you're going to be in trouble. But that whole process started long before the NATO application, and that I think one needs to be reminded of. And I'm saying that back home as well, because a lot of people are saying, not a lot of people, but some people are saying, oh, it's because Sweden is applying for NATO membership. But it's not. It started years before. It's been going a long process. It's been going on for many years, several years. So no, I don't think that's going to be.
Thank you. نم بيموانية هيج هرشاك بيبو كرداني كلوين ك يعني أو ياسابيان قريتوا أجر هبي موضوع بكاكيش يك سويد لقال تركيا هيج ويكين يموا ريكروتنيكين يك خلق بقورنا دوش بكاكله هشتغشتوا وهزيكي تيروريست ناسرا ولا أوروبا شو للسويديش و ياسا كناقرتوا باشوا بەڵام لە دوای یەکی شەژەگەر بێت و ئەندامێکی پەکە کردەوەیکی تیرۆریستی بکە شتێک کە پەیوەندی بە تیرۆریزم
پرسیارەکەی من سەبارەت بە هەم جیهانی ئیسلامی و هەم ئەوروپایە. ئێمە 1600 ساڵە لە محیتێکی ئیسلامی عاشین. ئەنی ئەوانی کە ئەوان بە خەتەرێزان ئێمە بە شای خۆمان دینیمانە لە ئیسلامی میانەڕۆ تا گاتە داعش کە بە شای خۆمان دیمان خەتەری چۆن. ئەگەر ئیسلام لێرە سەیطرە بکات لەم ناوچانەی ئێمە بە تایبەتی لە کوردستان، ئەو ئێمە تازە موسڵمانین بەخۆشیمان بێ بە ناخۆشی. ئەگەر ئیسلام لێرە سەیطرەیەکی باش بکاتە سەر ئەم کۆمەڵگایە، داواکانی لە ئێمە چییە بێ؟ لە ئێمە ئەوەیە لێ پێویستە لەمە و دواڕیش بێڵنەوە سمەڵ تاشن مەسەلە. شەرواڵ لە پێکەن 10 سانتیم کوورتر بێ، ڕقتان لە مۆسیقا بێ، دژی ڕەسم بن، ئابجۆ مەخۆنەوە، ئەمانە مەنعەکەن، ئەمانە بۆ ئێمە شتێکی زۆر عەجایب نییە. ڕەنگە تەقەوولیشی بکەین. بۆ نمونە لە پەرلەمانەکانی ئێمە چ عێراق و چ کوردستان نابێ بڕیارە بێ دژی شەریعەت بێ. یعنی کەواتە ئێمە پابەندین بەوە. خەتەرەکە من لە وڵاتی ئیسلامی نابینم. خەتەرەکە ئێستا لە ئەوروپای بینی. من 40 ساڵەمە پێشکە چوومە سوید، لە هەموو سویدە یەک مزگەوتم. ئێستا سەدان مزگەوت و سەدان مەلا و سەدان منەزەمەی لێیە. ئێستا خەتەری ئیسلام لەسەر ئەوروپایە، چونکە ئێمە بە عەمەلی کە داعش هات ئەوەنەی ئەوروپیمان تیادی، چێتەوە قوڵێ کرد ئەڵمانیا بێ بۆ جیهاد، بێ بۆ کوردستان بۆ جیهاد، سویدیە، هیندیەک بەڵ حاصڵ لە هەموو دنیاوە، ئەمە چی کۆی کردەوە؟ یعنی وای لێ هاتووە ئێستا خەتەرەکە لەسەر ئەوروپایە. ئەوروپا خاوەنی بەها دیموکراتیەکان و شارستانیەکە، ئەم خەڵکە پێی خۆشە ڕووکاتەوێ کە ئێستا بە سەدان کەس هەر هەوڵەیە ڕۆژانە بەڕۆیەکی. ئێمە هەموومان دیمان لە فەڕەنسا لەسەر وێنەیەکی کاری کاتۆلیک و مەزبەحەی ڕوویانێ، لە بڕۆکسەڵ عینەشت، لە دانیمارک عینەشت. ئێوە وەکو ئەوروپیەک چی ئەکەن بەرامبەر ئەم خەتەرە گەورەیە لە ئەوروپا؟ ئایا لە 30 ساڵیکە ئێوە بە پێی تەوەقوعات، یعنی ڕەنگە ئێوە کاریکاتەرەکان پێشبینیێکی زۆر جوانەکەن، وایان کردووە لە ساڵی 2050 لە فەڕەنسا شەریعەت حوکمەکە، ئیسلامەکە حوکمەکە، ئەو 6 ملیۆنە بە حوکمی تەکاسوری کەلۆژ ئاسا ئەوانە بن باکسەریت. ئێوە بەرامبەر ئەو خەتەرە چیەکەن؟ جەنابی دکتۆر ماگنۆس.
daily Chabad.
Yes.
And we had a discussion. I want to refer to what you said earlier about Islam, Islamism, and the Islam in the Middle East and in Kurdistan. We have been living with that for 1400 years. But I'm actually afraid of your destiny with Islam in Europe because the number of mosques and Islamic religious institutions are accelerating. And what would you do when Islam is actually dictating the norms in Europe
I don't
in
think they're
50
going to
years?
dictate the norms, but here again, it's an excellent point. We talked about that the other day also. And the thing is that I could go on all night about this, but I'm not going to do that. But the thing is that you have a religious tradition that don't separate between religion and politics. Islam is as much a political, enterprise as a religious enterprise. It's both. And then you bring in a lot of people, Muslims, with that, who have that tradition in their head. They meet a liberal European system that long ago separated, powers. So of course there are going to be clashes. That's one thing. That's why it's going to be so difficult. And then you do, especially after 2015, when you had loads of people coming in without really checking who they were. The other problem is that for the Islamic or Islamist organization already active in Europe, like the Muslim Brotherhood, for instance, which is a huge problem, they quickly realized that here is a way for them to gain even more political influence. So what did they do? They went to governments, local governments. I'm giving you a long story in a short version here. You have to realize that. I can talk about that. And again, read my book. But they said, we know how the Muslims are. You talk to us, you give us the money, and we're going to help you integrate these people. And that's been one of my key arguments for years when I'm trying to educate the politicians that no, this is wrong, because what they are not interested in integrating as much as separation. In English, if you're a sociologist, you call it enclavization of society. You have enclaves in society. That's what they're aiming for. It's not necessarily violent, but it's separation of people. It's not integration. But what they give to governments is some kind of social peace, right? It's not really working out that well either, for a number of reasons. But that's the argument that is used. So I would, first of all, stop the financing, follow the money, as the Americans are saying. Because in Sweden, not only there, but particularly in my own country, it's very easy to get public funding for all kinds of, civil society projects. And one has to be very clear of what is what here. That system was built up 100 years ago in Sweden, when everybody, at least every male looked like me, tall, blonde, and handsome. But that's not the case any longer. And you have to educate and convince the politicians to realize this. So go for the money for starters, and then demand that if anyone is going to apply for any kind of public funding or grant, you have to sign on the dotted line. And we, as Swedes, just to take that example, but it's the same situation all over Europe, really, at least in Northern and Western Europe. You have to be very clear of what kind of society you have. Where are the red lines here? Where are the red lines you can't cross? We are in the middle of this conflict in Sweden today. And I would argue it's one of the major ones, because at the end of the day, it's incompatible to have a system that don't separate between religion and politics in a society built on separation of powers. It's impossible to get to compute here. And that's the main issue, social issue, that we have today in Sweden and Western Europe.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
But this is so important.
طبعا زۆر گرنگە و پرسەکە جنابتان باسان کرد دوێنێ شکایەتی باسمان کرد لای ئێوە ئەمە کێشەیە بەڵام من پێم وانە زۆر بەدبین نیم ڕژبین نیم پێم وانە کە شتێکی لەو بابەتە لە ئەوروپا ڕوو بدە بەڵام بەگشتی ئیسلام جیاوازی لە نێوان سیاست و ئەو ناکە ئەمەش کێشەکەیە کە دەمەوێت زۆر تەرکیزی لەسەر بکەم جیاوازی لە نێوان سیاست و دینە کە ئیسلام نایکەم.
If you tell a joke, you have to translate it, you know?
Absolutely. دەڵێ نوکتەیەک جێرایە بۆم شەرح بکە. Okay, next time perhaps. I didn't actually hear that.
زۆر سپاس.
I did not.
No, he said.
I know.
And if it happens, we will seek asylum in Iraq. If Europe is lost.
زۆر سپاس بۆ ئامادەبوونتان بۆ تەحملکردنتان چونکە کۆبوونەوەیەکە درێژ بوو. زۆر سپاس بۆ دکتۆر نۆریل.